Welcome to the Innovation Conversation, a podcast about innovators, both in business and real life. Hosted by myself, Ricardo Pascual, and Harry McDonough. This podcast is also sponsored by ODEV Tech. ODEV Tech is your premier software development partner. Make sure you check them out at odev.tech. The podcast is also sponsored by Notion.so. Notion is offering 6 months for free for new users. Make sure you check out our website, thestartupevents.co.uk, to redeem this offer.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Conversation. Today we are joined by Prakriti Garb. Prakriti, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Pleasure having you. Prakriti, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes, I am a second year student at the LSE and I'm currently studying management. Alongside this, I am the managing director of Kickstart Global, which is UK's largest student-led incubator. Happy to share more about that as we go on.
Yes, I'm fascinated that you're only on the second year, you're already managing director of the company. So well done. Quite impressive. How did that come to be?
So essentially, I joined the team last year. It was like there was an event that was happening, and I essentially just walked up to the team saying, "I love what you're doing," and ended up joining, and the rest of it's history. It sounds like a cringe story, but it is very much true. The Kickstart team is also really nice and flexible in the sense that it works very much like a startup. So when I joined, even though my role was like a specific category, I ended up basically doing everything. And then we've grown a lot since then. So it was kind of like there was a bunch of people who really wanted to take it forward, and I was one of them. And so it got passed on to me by lovely directors who were there before me.
Oh, okay. So that's I love the go-getter attitude. Like you just walk in and say, "I want to join," and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea what they did back then, or?
Yeah, so I attended the event because when I came into LSE, I really was into startups. And I think when I wanted to study management, what I meant was that, I want to start my own startup one day. I do think that in London, there's a lot of other careers, of course, that are like a lot more popular. For example, finance, investment banking, consulting. And I think that this ambition of mine kind of got lost. And thanks to Kickstart, I, came across it again. And I found it really interesting that they were helping students build student startups. And I was like, well, I don't have an idea right now, but I do really believe in what you're doing, which was great. And yeah, just ended up joining. I didn't know much about it then, but now I do know it inside out. And thanks to all of the alumni who are super helpful in kind of making sure that I have all the guidance that I need to run everything.
So just for our audience, what exactly do you guys do with Kickstart?
Yes. So a bit of background. So Kickstart started 10 years ago. And the main reason why we started was that there were a bunch of entrepreneurship societies across the UK, which had a lot of students who were interested in starting startups. But when it came to actually building teams, which are resilient and like cross-disciplinary and have the right skill sets to make it happen, they would fall short. So let's say if there was someone from LSE who was like great at finance and wanted to build a fintech app, they can't exactly do it without a UI designer or someone who can kind of code the app for them. And I think the idea was to bring together talents from the best universities in the UK and get very domain intensive experts together and put them into teams and help them form teams and build it. We've been doing this for 10 years now. So over the years, it's changed quite a bit. What we do now is we help any founder under 24 in a lot of ways. They can come in without an idea and they leave with an investable MVP. Our alumni over the past 10 years have raised like 35 million. I think it's gone up to 36 like yesterday because someone else, one of our alumni, Hands In, which is a fintech, raised another round. So yeah, we're sector agnostic. We have a lot of cool startups, approximately 17, a lot of different industries. So we have them in health tech, med tech, sports tech. And all of this has been done by students who are working part-time. Full-time students who are doing this kind of like on a voluntary basis. And we do not charge our founders anything except for their commitment and the fact that they have to show up for every single thing in the program if they're selected.
Wow, that's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite a lot of money as well. And is this limited? So this is not limited to LSE, right? So we actually work with all the universities.
Yeah. So we have approximately 55 university partners, which operate across the UK. This year, we've also expanded to, let's say, Edinburgh, Leeds, Leicester, and all these places. So we have quite a broad reach across the UK.
It's quite impressive. Obviously, I end up talking to a lot of students, so it's good. But what do you think are the main points for students when they're launching a business? Is it hard? Is it easy? Obviously, with you guys, I'm assuming it becomes a lot easier. But what does the market tell you? What does students tell you?
I do think building a startup's never easy. I think a lot of the approach that we had in a few years back was that a lot of students come into this saying, oh, this is like the easy way out. And we're going to choose like building a startup as a career because, well, it's like very difficult to apply for internships. But actually, that's not true because building a startup is perhaps harder, if not just as hard. Sorry, it's just as hard, if not harder than, let's say, pursuing any other career. But I think the main pain point that students have is not having the right people to speak to, because in the UK, there's not exactly that many role models of kind of like founders, and especially in university itself, there's not that many, let's say, seniors or alumni who you can look up to, who are ready to guide you on what to do from day one. With Kickstart coming in, because we have access to that community and because we have our eyes on the best talent, we're able to put these people in the room together. So I would say one is the lack of community of student founders themselves, but also the lack of community of people who can give them advice, and we solve both of them. I do think after you've become a student founder, the pain points are different, but I do think at the start, it is both of these. Once you already have a startup, then I do think the pain point would be to be able to get investment before you graduate from university. Naturally, if you have an offer from like say McKinsey, which is paying you like some 60 grand, it's very hard in comparison to that to take the riskier option of building a startup, even though it would be more fulfilling and let's say even more profitable in the long run. So a lot of our goals now is also helping students in that later stage and making sure that they're able to secure funding and have the right introductions to investors before they graduate from university.
What do the investors say? Do they almost say you're quite young, or they actually say, I like the idea, let me go and invest in it?
I think because a lot of students are first-time founders, if you look at any kind of like accelerators, like let's say Techstars or Antler, what they rely on a lot when they're getting first-time founders is just credibility, right? So if you have the right kind of signals of like, oh, you worked at Google for 10 years, or you've like, done this research for 10 years, those are usually very good indicators that you're going to be a successful founder. So for investors to back student founders, it does take a leap. I do think that with the startup founders that we have been able to find at Kickstart, who despite, let's say, having only been in the industry for 4 years, do know it inside out because they're that obsessed with the problem and that obsessed with the users, we're able to solve that gap for investors. And I do think having the brand of, let's say, Kickstart behind startups really does help in bridging that credibility gap, because investors know that deal flow that usually comes from us is beneficial to them and does have a lot more credibility than, let's say, someone who's just emailed them out of the blue.
And where do you find all these investors?
Mostly LinkedIn. I think it would be, I think someone asked me recently what's like things you're good at. And I think I said emailing and LinkedIn. Like a lot of this simply comes from reaching out. We also have, 10 years of history. So we have investing partners who, let's say, invested in a startup 7 years ago and they've backed us since because they've seen the quality of startup founders that we've got them. And there's also a lot of investors in our own alumni network. So people who graduate from Kickstart and then end up becoming investors are super useful. But a lot of it is also simply angel investors who stumble across our events, are impressed by the quality because they never suspected that it could be possible to have star quality from even student founders, and then they basically never leave.
So that's a great success story. I mean, from talking with your community, do you think students are still, actually, like a couple of years ago, everyone wanted to be able to start. Do you think that's still very much the case?
Absolutely.
Or they're still, afraid of doing something?
I think it's quite funny, actually, when a lot of people tell me that, oh, we, went to this place and it seemed like everyone wanted to build startups. I think being in that startup community now, it does feel like that because, let's say, when we release applications for our fellowship, we do get, let's say, like thousands in one day, right? I think this is very different on ground when you actually walk into a university, because I remember feeling like I was basically one of very few people in LSE who actually wanted to build a startup as opposed to like join any other I know a lot of people at Imperial, for example, as well, who are surrounded by like 90% of the people who, let's say, want to go into like quant trading. And it's very hard to still stand your ground and realize that what you want to do and where your competitive advantage lies is building a startup. So yeah, I absolutely don't think that a lot of people are going to build startups. And I think A, it's still that hard to find a community, and B, we still need a lot more student founders. We still need a lot more people doing this from the get-go rather than deciding to, give all their talent to other things.
What do you think are like the main mistakes that founders make, especially at such a young age?
I think that's a very good question. I think the biggest mistake that founders probably make is mistaking a lot of like LinkedIn and cloud stuff for actual progress. Like I think I've seen a lot of founders who've spent a lot of time building their idea, but a lot of it is kind of like brand building, which is great, but not actually getting to it. And I think maybe just the idea of that they don't have enough time. I do think that student founders, but already doing a degree in, let's say, half the time that it's supposed to. And to be able to fit a startup in that, it is very important that you actually stick to it and do it consistently. So some of the biggest success stories that we've had at Kickstart are that they, let's say, did a fellowship like 2 years ago and they're still building a startup, and it's now that they start seeing results. So perhaps giving up too early because you don't think you don't have the time, or giving up too early because you don't think you didn't get like success within the first 2 months would probably be the biggest mistake.
What's the normal age for the students? Are they 20-year-old, or are they postgrad or master degree students?
So we have founders under 24. That can mean anything. So we do have people who've, even people who are pursuing PhDs, and then we have a lot of master students. Most of them are like second or third year undergrads, simply because that gives them enough time to actually build a startup while they're still with us.
Yeah, and I guess it must be fairly chaotic to start while still studying, right? Because you obviously have commitments, you need to deadlines for exams and all that, so it must be quite exciting. And what type of support do they have
at Kickstart?
Yeah.
So we run a couple of different things. The main thing that we run is the fellowship. So the Founders Under 24 fellowship runs for 20 weeks, where they have weekly masterclasses, mixers, and mentorship. So when it comes to weekly masterclasses, that means you meet with business icons who've been doing this forever, and they kind of give you advice. And this is not like a fireside chat. So it's not like a lecture hall, but like 1,000 students. And there's like some old white guy, like just talking about what he's done in his life. No, it's a room of 10 very carefully selected student founders sitting together on a table and getting one-on-one advice from very experienced founders. So this year, we've been grateful to have the backing of a lot of incredible people. We've had the CEO of Octopus Group, founders of Oak North. We've had the founder of Too Good To Go, then founder of Flight Story. Like a lot of these people who've like founder of Amicable as well, they've come down to literally where we work in Shortage Exchange, who, by the way, are partners with us and are absolutely incredible, sat down with us and just talked for hours. I think it's also underestimated how much founders are also craving deeper connections with emerging founders, because a lot of them, like you'd expect them to prefer, let's say, fireside chats, but they're more than happy to kind of have one-on-ones with these student founders. So that's the kind of support that they have, because they get access to the phone books of essentially all of these millionaires who've done this before, who are very relevant to their fields. Secondly, they have mentors. So we have dual mentorship at Kickstart, which means that you have one mentor from your industry. So if you're building a climate tech, you'll have someone who's, let's say, built a wind farm before, and then you also get paired up with an accelerator mentor or an investor. So if we think that the next step for you after Kickstart is perhaps going to YC, then you will be paired up with someone who's been at YC before and can essentially help you make sure that you get there. Basically, it just creates a great strategic funnel for making sure that they have the support to get resources beyond Kickstart as well. The third thing is mixers, which is essentially just get-togethers and co-working with the Kickstart team and the Kickstart community. Every single Saturday, we meet together, heads down from like 9 a.m. and we're usually there till like 12 a.m. in the night, just building together. And this can also mean like one-off workshops by the students and stuff like that. Yeah. And yeah, just like chilling around. I do think that the benefits of just like the synergies of just putting people together in one room is a lot. Like we could do absolutely nothing and just have the founders, and by the end of it they will have had like 5 customers from just talking to each other, absolutely like revamp their deck by just giving each other feedback, and have made like a lot more progress on, let's say, their SaaS or like, exchange tech stacks, which is pretty exciting. Other than that, we have, the usual things of like, we sponsor event invites, or we get them like credits to a lot of softwares, like hundreds of thousands of pounds essentially worth of stuff. Or we, make intros to like anyone and all that.
What would you change in the system? If you change anything, what would that be?
I think the biggest thing that I would change is being the number of female founders. I do think that despite there being a lot of like female leadership in the team, we've tried very hard to make sure that we're able to come to at least 40-60, if not 50-50 cohort representation. But this is extremely hard because application numbers are skewed and it's very hard to find that talent. So definitely change that. I do think something else that I would change in the system is being able to interact with a lot more angels on a regular basis. There's something that we're working on. It's not exactly a systemic issue, but yeah, that's kind of next in our plans, to get a lot more angels involved. It just has a lot more like quicker deployment of liquidity than VC.
Why do you think there's less female founders? I mean, because I get it, after a certain age, I get there's different family commitments and all that, also different societal pressures. But in uni, it's pretty much, it's a blank form.
Yeah. I think And this is something we were talking about to a lot of the female speakers as well that came about, which is that what is perhaps the biggest barrier? And I think it comes from just the sense of the fact that when you're a first-time founder, since you don't have the logos to back you, you kind of need yourself to, if you need to have the confidence to realize that if you have expertise in a certain domain, you're going to be able to build a startup which competes against, let's say, industry giants who've been in the industry for like tens of thousands of years and entirely turn it upside down. I do think with female founders, we've seen some incredible talent, but they do need more of a push to actually realize that they're capable of doing that. In fact, when we look at like application quality, like I do think there's not exactly a difference in quality from female founders and male founders, but it's simply the number of applications that is much less from female founders. So something that we're working on is just reaching out to them more often and saying that you can do this. A lot of like being a founder involves putting your face on, let's say, like brands and like building a personal brand and all of that, which stems from confidence. And yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest one. Beyond that, I do think that like VC investments are quite highly skewed. Like female founders, even if they do join a program, the likelihood of them getting investment as compared to a male founder is dramatically lower. Like 2% of all VC funding goes to women, which is quite insane. We're trying to change that by getting a lot more female angels involved. But yeah, I do think that the investment ecosystem needs to change for us to actually be able to retain the female founders that do go through our program.
100%. I mean, talking about women, that seems to be a problem that everyone's facing, which is they don't have enough support, and when they do have enough support, it's really hard to articulate to a male VC, this is actually building, and them actually believing in them, which is kind of ludicrous in this day and age, but yeah, I guess it still happens, which is obviously very wrong.
Exactly.
It's something that we all need to change, I guess. And,
Absolutely.
What do you do to keep yourself motivated? I mean, because obviously I'm assuming you work quite a lot of hours, so how do you balance everything?
I genuinely don't have an answer to this. Like, I do love it. I think I said this recently. We hosted a summit the other day at Google headquarters when we were there for the entire day with like a lot of VCs and a lot of student founders. And like Kickstart's genuinely given me all of my friends, all of my mentors, all the advice that I get. Like people who I hang out with on a day-to-day, even when I'm not working, are Kickstart founders. And it is genuinely the community that I was seeking when I was at LSE, when I was not able to find it. So I think that the purpose of Kickstart, which is to find like a home for student founders, is genuinely what it gave me. And I think that is very easy to stay motivated like that. I also think that when you speak with founders who've done it before you every single week, and when you hear from all these masterclass speakers, I think it makes you realize they're normal people. They've done this before. They also had humble beginnings. And they've also kind of like begun from really small things. And I also think that with the success stories that you see at Kickstart, so there have been friends of mine who I've seen come in with just an idea. And a year later, they've like raised money and moved to a different country because their VCs were from there, right? And I think when you see those kind of success stories, it's just very hard to believe that that what we're doing is not impactful, because it really is. It genuinely matters. So it's very easy to get up in the morning and have this be the first thought in your head. But also I think that it makes you realize that a lot of things are possible if you just do them. So if you have an idea, if you think we want to make something happen, we have live examples around us of you can do things that you set your minds to. So it's very easy to follow through.
I like that. It's a little bit of Eminem there, but yeah, I like it. I kind of like it. But what's the structure like? So how is Kickstarter organized?
We're just a bunch of students. So we have directors. We do have 2 new directors who are Val and Nela, who will be kind of taking forward the legacy with Kickstart. And the rest of it's the students. So we have students from LSE, Warwick, Bath, Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, Imperial, and they all have different roles. Of course, again, we operate very much like a startup as well. So it's very ad hoc based on the kind of events that we're throwing. But yeah, we have a team of 20 and they're all working. They're all full-time students doing this alongside. We're trying now to potentially onboard some people full-time who are kind of willing to take a break from the university to work on this, to expand the program, but that's in progress.
And, what do you think universities should start doing differently? Because obviously you're studying management. Do you think universities first stage should actually start doing something different to incentivize entrepreneurship in the UK? Or what do you think about it?
I think universities right now don't do a very good job of even exposing people to the fact that this is a possible career. I think entrepreneurship is always like categorized as like, the flashy thing that like you do if nothing else works out, or it's the thing that only, let's say, someone who's deeply technical and who's again been in a different career for 10 years can do. I think there's very few examples of, let's say, alumni who just graduated and within the next 2 years are raising money. Secondly, I do think personally, even like university content is very old. There's a lot of revamping that needs to be done in order to genuinely equip students to build companies. So, for example, if there's classes on AI, perhaps we should be talking more on like hands-on, like tools that are being used, which let's say like CRM softwares and stuff like that can be employed, as opposed to learning about the history of AI. This is a personal strong opinion that I have, which I know there's lots of opinions on, but I do think that in general, while learning fundamentals is great, I do think the curriculum needs to be updated to actually match the pace of the world, which is definitely way faster than what they're teaching at.
Interesting, because I would imagine that being from one of the UK best universities, they would actually have an up-to-date curriculum and all that. But
right.
It's interesting actually getting the feedback and realizing that might not be the case. So I guess it does come down to the individual.
I think it's perhaps also degree to degree. I do think technical degrees are far better at equipping students to do that than management.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that my degree is perhaps more suited to other careers. Let's say if someone were to pursue like consulting or banking, I do think LSE gives you all the skills that you need up to date on pursuing those, but perhaps not running a company.
Interesting. Now, I'm always curious on one thing, which is, what's the last book you read? How impactful has that book been? Of course, if it's just a bad book, please don't recommend it. But I like the best book you've read in the last year.
Right. The best book I've read, I will have to think deeply about this. I'm not sure about book. I follow a lot of people online who I kind of read into. I do think Paul Graham, who is the partner of IC, has some brilliant essays. There's one, I think, about the anatomy of determinism or the anatomy of ambition, one of those. Absolutely incredible. There's Case Kenny on Instagram, which I think has pretty great content. To be very honest, yeah, I think I prefer more podcasts. Dario for CEO is a great one for any business-related content and things like that. I do think recently all of my knowledge has been coming from meeting people in person from masterclasses. So books have kind of been put on the shelf, but I will get back to you whenever I read books if I have any recommendations.
Interesting. And I know for all the young entrepreneurs listening in, what do you advise them to do when they're having a bad day?
When
you're having a bad day, when you're having one of those days that nothing seems to work out, what do you do, and what do you advise them to do?
Right. I think most problems are smaller than you think. If you have a rethink, I think the advantage that we have as young founders, let's say, or young entrepreneurs, is that with the student label, you can kind of mess up and you still have a backup. And I think this is the coolest thing because you're able to kind of really experiment, and the risk of failure for us is a lot less than, let's say, if you were like 10 years from now, because you can mess up really badly and go back the next day and just start something fresh or completely revamp what you were doing. And like, no one's going to bat it up alive because you're a student and it's completely fine. I think this is the biggest thing that I have right now is just the brand of the student. It gets you lots of free stuff. Go to like any software and you will essentially get a lot of things. We have most of us. So our spend is like very close to zero because most softwares that we use, most of our tech stack comes for free. And then we have workspace again sponsored. We have events also sponsored by people because we're student run. I do think for, again, student founders, risk is just low. Restart again. You're a student, you're young. We've got a lot of time to make mistakes, but then we can also amend them. So that's that.
I love that. Prakriti, if people want to reach out to you and find out more about the work you do, how can they do so?
Feel free to search me up on LinkedIn at Prakriti Garb or email me at prakriti@kickstartglobal.com. I'm usually very responsive on my email. We also have a lovely team who will reply to you, if not me. We have a lot more exciting projects coming up for the year, not just for the summer or later. If you're a student, investor, a startup founder who wants to help, a mentor who wants to get involved, just reach out. We usually have, there can never be enough support. So if you think you can help in any way, reach out. We think we can definitely help you in many ways if you're a founder or an investor. So I would not miss out on that opportunity and tread with our decision very carefully.
Sounds good.
Lovely. Thank you so much. It was lovely to be here as well.
The podcast is also sponsored by Notion.so. Notion is offering 6 months for free for new users. Make sure you check out our website, thestartupevents.co.uk, to redeem this offer. This podcast is also sponsored by startupnetworks.co.uk. Startup Networks, it's an online forum where you can find all the resources you need to run your startup, from grants to investors to tips and tricks on how to be successful in your startup. This podcast is also sponsored by ODEV Tech. ODEV Tech is your premier software development partner. Make sure you check them out at odev.tech.